What's up guys, welcome back to another video in the Learn Linux series, and today we're going to talk about creating a file, viewing the contents of the file, and renaming files. Here's the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to log into our virtual machine. You can see here I'm logged in as root, and as you remember I'm in this squiggly line directory as I called the last time, or as its real name is tilde. And so just to refresh your memory, I'm going to type pwd, and you'll see that I am in /root, which is the home directory of the root user, and you can see that I am on the Debian machine, which is the host name of this machine, just as a reminder from last time. And everything that I do inside of this folder is simply as if it was like my own personal workspace almost for this user. It's my own personal directory. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear my screen, and we're going to get started with creating a file. And to do that, we're going to use a command called touch. Now what touch does, if you read the man page, is it says change file stamps. However, what we can use it for is creating a file, because by default, if there's no file that exists, it'll automatically create one. And you can see that it even says it right here if you read the man page. A file argument that does not exist is created empty. So oftentimes, even though it is meant to simply make it appear as if you literally touched the file, right? So remember when we said the stat command, like let's say bin bash, and we see the access modify change times, what it's meant to do is if I say touch bin bash, it's as if I had touched that file and modified it or did something to it. So if I type stat bin bash again, you'll notice that everything changed on the modify access and change times because I touched it, quote unquote. So if I type touch and then the name of a file, so we'll say test.txt, we'll see that if we type ls, we've now created a file called test.txt. And if we use ls space -l, we hit enter, and -l basically means give us a long description of all of our information in this directory. And if we type man ls and we scroll down, you'll see eventually it says here -l, use a long listing format, and there's all kinds of other options you can use with ls. But if we type ls-l, we'll see that we have our file here, test.txt, and all its information with it. So if we look at the beginning, we have our permissions, which refers to the user's permission first. There's 3 positions: read, write, execute. And we have read, write for the user that owns this file. Then we have read permissions right here, 3 more. And these 3 read permissions are for the group that owns this file. And then finally, we have 3 more permissions for everybody else that's not the group that owns the file and that's not the user that owns the file. And this first little dash here, you don't have to worry about just yet. That's a special little permissions flag which you can use later for other cool things. And basically, what we have is that the root user right here is the user that owns the file. So the root user has read and write permissions only. Then we have the root group. So the root group is what owns this file. And you can see that even though the user is root, there's also a group for your user, which is also the same name as your username. So in this case, there's the root user and then there's the root group. And you can see that if you're in the root group, but you are not yourself the root user, then you will have only read permissions. And then we have everybody else who will only have read permissions. Now, the next step here is we see that it has 0 bytes inside of this file. That means that this file is completely empty. And finally, of course, this file was created on September 23rd, 1901. That's the modified time more specifically. And you can see that the name of the file is test.txt. And if we add more files, so if we say touch test2, touch test3, and we type ls-l, you can see it does it exactly as we said before in a long listing format and gives us all our details for each of the files. And you notice the permissions are consistent. There's a certain like default to how these permissions, ownership, and things are created. So now, how do we add information to this file, specifically test.txt? There's a few different ways you can do that. First of all, we can use a text editor. So one of the common text editors that you will see on Linux is called Nano. And in this case, I don't believe it's installed on Debian. And normally you type nano and then test.txt, so the name of the file, and open it up. Oh, in this case it is installed, I guess. And just like a regular notepad, we can type random text here. So then how do we save it? Well, we look down here all the way at the bottom of the screen, and we can see all the different options. And you see this little angle bracket. What does that mean? That angle bracket simply refers to the control key. This M controls to the out key. So like the out next to your space bar, for example, on the left side, more than likely, used most of the time. So in this case, if we wanted to save the contents of the file, we only care about this right here, Control O, which is write out, which means save. And then right after that, we care about this one, which is Control X, which means exit. So let's hit Control O, and you see it says file name to write right here at the bottom, and then right here at the bottom, and then we hit enter. So we want to write to the file called test.txt. So if we like just type Nano without a file name and simply typed in here, it'll automatically ask us where we want to save it to. So we'll hit enter, and you can see down here it said wrote one line to the file, and now we'll hit Control X, and boom, we've exited out of the file. So now how do we view the contents of that file? Let's clear the screen, ls, and we wrote to test.txt, so we have to use a command called cat. And if we go to the man page for cat, the man page tells us that cat refers to concatenate files and print on the standard output. What that means is that it's going to concatenate, as in combine the text from different files and put it out as one singular output, as if it was one singular file. It can literally combine the text. So if I type cat test.txt, you'll see that I can view the file by doing that, because it's going to print it to what's known as standard output, or as you will sometimes see it referred to as std out. That's a shorter way of seeing it in certain man pages and certain documentation. And that's simply the screen that we're looking at right now when we print out things. It just means that regular output, that's not an error, it's just regular text that's coming out from any program that you run. Now, of course, we can also open it up in Nano again and view the contents of the file. That's another way you can do it. There's also alternatively a program called VI, and there's also Vim. And the VI you'll find on pretty much every single Linux machine. Nano, not so much. Nano is actually more rare to find on certain kinds of machines. But VI you will find on every machine. So if I type just VI and nano.txt, or sorry, VI and then test.txt, you'll see that it opens up here. And I won't be able to do much here, and you'll be like, well, how do I exit out? Well, as long as you hit no other keys, and in case you did, all you have to do is hit escape a few times. So probably once or twice is fine. Shift and hit colon, so as in 2 dots, and you'll see down here it'll show up to the colon, not a semicolon, a colon, and you just type Q, hit enter, and that you'll quit out of VI. There's always this joke about not being able to exit VI, but realistically that's all you have to do. Hit escape a few times, colon and Q, and you'll be out. Another trick is sometimes you can hit ZZ 2 times, capital ZZ, sorry, shift ZZ, and then it'll exit you out as well. It'll save and exit. So I'll clear the screen again. Another way we can write to the file is by using output redirection. What does that mean? Well, in Linux we have the concept of standard out, as we said. So with that concept of standard output, we can redirect that to somewhere else, in this case a file. So if we have a single right angle bracket, what this means is that we're going to take anything on the left side, the output of any command on the left side of the angle bracket, and redirect it to whatever is on the right side of the angle bracket, usually a file. So let's say if I use cat, right, test.txt, and let's say I want to redirect the output into test2. So what's that going to do? If I hit enter, there's no output. But if I do cat test2, you'll see that cat test2 now has the same contents as test.txt. Essentially, everything that was outputted from the command test.txt was put into the file test2. Now there's something else we can do, which is using 2 angle brackets. And why would we want to do that? Well, let's say I open up Nano, test2, and then I like modify this, delete all the contents, and then we'll say this is some test content. And I save that, remember, Control O, enter, Control X, clear the screen, and I cat test2, view the contents, and then I cat test.txt. Let's say I do cat test.txt, and I do right angle bracket, redirect the output of cat test.txt into test2, and then I cat test2. Notice now test2's content is completely gone. So I completely lost everything that I was doing. We don't want that sometimes. So what we can do is we can hit the bar a few times, and then we'll use 2 right angle brackets like this. And what that's going to do is going to add a new line underneath test2's current content and append the content of that's being redirected, in this case, the output of test.txt. So if I do cat test2, you'll see that now I should have 2 lines of the same content. And if I type it again, 2 more lines, or 1 more line, sorry. And then if I do 1 angle bracket, you'll see that it'll go back down to 1 line, because now test.txt only has 1 line of content. It completely overwrote the file contents. Now, something else to keep in mind is if, let's say, I don't have a file, I have cat test.txt and redirect it to a new file that doesn't exist, so let's call it apples, and then I cat apples, it automatically created the file even though it never existed in our directory. So what's something else we can do? So there's a command called echo. Echo literally echoes back the text that we write into the command. So if we type echo and then random text, it literally echoes back the text that we gave it. And normally, just to avoid problems, I recommend using quotation marks around your text, and that'll help you prevent certain conflicts with certain characters within bash. So if you hit enter, you'll see that it literally echoes back everything that we gave to it. So we can take that information that's being output into standard out, that's where it's being echoed to, and again redirect that to a file. So we'll say test3 and ls, and we'll see cat test3, and our contents from our echo command are there. So now something you might have noticed is that I have test.txt and then I have apples test2, test3, and they don't have file extensions. There's no .txt at the end. The reason for that is that file extensions don't really indicate anything, except for certain programs which might rely on it to work. So if we do this same program which we're using right now, which is bash, we type file bin bash, you'll see that it's an executable file. And if I cat bin bash, you'll see a bunch of gibberish because it's an executable file. You know, it's what we call a binary file. It's like an exe on Windows. That's the equivalent. Linux automatically detects that it's an executable file using the concept of what's known as a magic number. We won't talk about that, but essentially Linux is able to determine what it is without looking at the file extension and do things accordingly with it. Due to that, we simply just need to use the file command, look at what the file is, and then from there we can go ahead and do what we need to do, such as cat the file, execute the file, whatever it is, to view the contents of it or to execute it, or if it's a binary. Because for all you know, it could be a binary file that has a .txt file ending. On Windows, that won't work. It'll simply open a notepad. On Linux, if you're just on T2I, it doesn't care about the file extension, so you can execute a .txt file as a regular binary, and no, it's not gonna happen. Actually, we can prove that right now. We'll use the copy command, which we'll learn about later, and I'll copy bin bash to test, and we'll rename it. We'll copy it to test.txt, and we'll say we'll change the permissions, and then we'll execute test.txt. And yeah, there we go. It ran the command bin bash. If I type exit, it'll like exit out of the bash because I'm already in a bash prompt. So how do we rename a file if we already have it? So let's say this apples file, I don't like the name apples. I want to rename it to apples.txt so that it's clearer that for other people that it is a text file. Even though I just said that it's potentially not a text file, it's more or less understandable to most humans that a txt is a text file. So we'll say the command mv, which means move, and if you type the man page again, we can see that it says move rename files, and we'll type mv apples and simply the name we want to rename it to, apples.txt. Hit enter, type ls, and you can see apples now became apples.txt. So with that, let's say I have apples.txt and I want to rename it test.txt. Oops, what just happened to test.txt? All of the contents from test.txt that were in there are gone and overwritten. So let's say I open up test2 and I put in some text. So let's say this is a test, control X, and we say test2, and we say mv test.txt into test2. All the contents of test2 are overwritten. So to prevent that, we can do something which is add a -i flag. So we do test.txt, or sorry, what else was in this file? So test2, we'll say mv test2, into test, I will use the -I flag for MV. Hit enter. You'll notice it says, would you like to overwrite test? So we can say yes or no using Y or N. So in this case, I don't want to overwrite it, so I'm just going to type N, and I prevent disaster, and the contents are preserved of both files. So that pretty much covers that. So in the next video, we'll talk about also how to deal with directories, how to rename directories, putting files in there, and certain rules about creating files and file names, etc. For now, simply practice using Nano and typing any file name, whatever, and just typing random text and saving, and then viewing the contents of the file, and simply creating empty files with touch or renaming files to other things. Practice using redirection to create files using echo, right, as the test, right, and we cat test. Don't forget you have our other redirection with 2 right brackets. Look at that, play around with that, you'll kind of get the hang of it. Using cat with multiple files. So if I take test and test3, you see it'll combine the contents into one file, then redirecting that into another 4th file called something, and then cat something. Just play around with it, and you start to get the hang of it. And I'll see you in the next video.